Alright, today we're going to finish chapter 2 of the City of Ember. As soon as she came into Garden Square, a voice cried, "Messenger!" Her first customer. It was old Natty Prine calling to her from the bench where she always sat. "This goes to Ravenet Parson, 18 Silverstone Square," she said. "Bend down." She bent down so that her ear was close to his whiskery mouth. The old man said in a slow, hoarse voice, "My stove is broke. Don't come for dinner. Repeat." Lena repeated the message. "Good," said Natty Prine. He gave Lena 20 cents, and she ran across the center to Silverstone Square, where she found Ravenet Parson, also sitting on a bench. She recited the message to him. "Old turnip head," he growled. "Lazy old flea face. He just doesn't feel like cooking." No reply. Lena ran back to Garden Square, passing a group of believers on the way. They were standing in a circle, holding hands, singing one of their cheerful songs. It seemed to Lena they were more believers than ever these days. What they believed in she didn't know, but it made them happy. They were always smiling. Her next customer turned out to be Mrs. Polster, the teacher of the 4th-year class. In Mrs. Polster's class they memorized passages from the book of the City of Ember every week. Mrs. Polster had a chart on the wall for everything with everyone's name listed. If you did something right, she made a green dot by your name. If you did something wrong, she made a red dot. "What you need to learn, children," she always said in her resonant, precise voice, "is the difference between right and wrong in every area of life. And once you learn the difference—" Here she would stop and point to the class, and the class would finish the sentence. "You must always choose the right." In every situation Mrs. Polster knew what the right choice was. Now here was Mrs. Polster again, looming over Lena and pronouncing her message. "To Anisette Laford, 39 Hum Street, as follows," she said. "My confidence in you has been seriously diminished since I heard about the disreputable activity in which you engaged on Thursday last. Please repeat." It took Lena 3 tries to get this right. "Uh-oh, a red dot for me," she said. Mrs. Polster did not seem to find this amusing. Lena had 19 customers that first morning. Some of them had ordinary messages like, "I can't come on Tuesday. Buy a pound of potatoes on your way home. Please come and fix my front door." Others had messages that made no sense to her at all, like Mrs. Polster's. But it didn't matter. The wonderful part about being a messenger was not the messages, but the places she got to go. She could go into the houses of people she didn't know and hidden alleyways and little rooms in the backs of stores. In just a few hours she discovered all kinds of strange and interesting things. For instance, Mrs. Sample, the mender, had to sleep on her couch because her entire bedroom, almost up to the ceiling, was crammed with clothes to be mended. Dr. Felina Tower had the skeleton of a person hanging against her living room wall, its bones all held in place with black string. "I study it," she said when she saw Lena staring. "I have to know how people are put together." At a house on Carew Street, Lena delivered a message to a worried-looking man whose living room was completely dark. "I'm saving on light bulbs," the man said. And when Lena took a message to Can Cafe, she learned that on certain days the back room was used as a meeting place for people who liked to converse about great subjects. "Do you think an invisible being is watching over us all the time?" she heard someone ask. "Perhaps," answered someone else. There was a long silence. And then again, perhaps not. All of it was interesting. She loved finding things out, and she loved running. And even by the end of the day she wasn't tired. Running made her feel strong and big-hearted. It made her love the places she ran through, and the people whose messages she delivered. She wished she could bring all of them the good news she so desperately wanted to hear. Late in the afternoon a young man came up to her, walking with a sort of sideways lurch. He was an odd-looking person. He had a very long neck, with a bump in the middle, and teeth so big they looked as if they were trying to escape from his mouth. His black, bushy hair stuck out from his head in untidy tufts. "I have a message for the mayor at the gathering hall," he said. He paused to let the importance of this be understood. "The mayor," he said. "Did you get that?" "I got it," said Lena. "All right, listen carefully. Tell him, 'Delivery at 8, from Looper.' Repeat it back." "Delivery at 8, from Looper," Lena repeated. It was an easy message. "All right, no answer required." He handed her 20 cents and she sprinted away. The gathering hall occupied one entire side of Harkin Square, which was the city's central plaza. The square was paved with stone. It had a few benches bolted to the ground here and there, as well as a couple of kiosks for notices. Wide steps led up to the gathering hall, and fat columns framed its big door. The mayor's office was in the gathering hall. So were the offices of the clerks who kept track of which buildings had broken windows, what street lamps needed repaired, and the number of people in the city. There was an office of the timekeeper, who was in charge of the town clock, and there were offices for the guards who enforced the laws of Ember. Now and then putting pickpockets or people who got into fights into the prison room, a small one-story structure with a sloping roof that jutted out from one side of the building. Lena ran up the steps and through the door into a broad hallway. On the left was a desk, and at the desk sat a guard. Barton Snod, assistant guard, set a badge on his chest. He was a big man with wide shoulders, brawny arms, and a thick neck, but his head looked as if it didn't belong to his body. It was small and round, and topped with a fuzz of extremely short hair. His lower jaw jutted out and moved a little from side to side, as if he were chewing on something. When he saw Lena, his jaw stopped moving for a moment, and his lips curled upward in a very small smile. "Good day," he said. "What business brings you here today?" "I have a message for the mayor." "Very good, very good." Barton Snod heaved himself to his feet. "Step this way." He led Lena down the corridor and opened the door marked reception room. "Wait here, please," he said. "The mayor is in his basement office on private business, but he will be up shortly." Lena went inside. "I'll notify the mayor," said Barton Snod. "Please have a seat. The mayor will be right with you. Or pretty soon." He left, closing the door behind him. A second later the door opened again and the guard's small fuzzy head reappeared. "What is the message?" he asked. "I have to give it to the mayor in person," said Lena. Of course," said the guard. The door closed again. He doesn't seem very sure about things, Lena thought. Maybe he's new at this job. The reception room was shabby, but Lena could tell that it had once been impressive. The walls were dark red with brownish patches where the paint was peeling away. In the right-hand wall was a closed door. An ugly brown carpet lay on the floor, and on it stood a large armchair covered in itchy-looking red material, and several smaller chairs. A small table held a teapot and some cups, and a large table in the middle of the room displayed a copy of the book of the City of Ember, lying open as if someone was going to read from it. Portraits of all the mayors of the city since the beginning of time hung on the walls, staring solemnly from behind pieces of old wooden window glass. Lena sat in the big armchair and waited. No one came. She got up and wandered around the room. She bent over the book of the City of Ember and read a few sentences. "The citizens of Ember may not have luxuries, but the foresight of the builders who filled the storerooms at the beginning of time has ensured that they will always have enough, and enough is all that a person of wisdom needs." She flipped a few pages. "The gathering hall clock," she read, "measures the hours of night and day. It must never be allowed to run down. Without it, how would you know when to go to work and when to go to school? How would the light director know when to turn the lights on and when to turn them off again? It is the job of the timekeeper to wind the clock every week and to place the date sign in Harkin Square every day. The timekeeper must perform these duties faithfully." Lena knew that not all timekeepers were as faithful as they should be. She'd heard of one, some years ago, who often forgot to change the date sign, so that it might say Wednesday, week 38, year 227 for several days in a row. There had even been a timekeeper who forgot to wind the clock so that it might stand at noon or at midnight for hours at a time, causing a very long day or a very long night. The result was that no one really knew anymore exactly what day of the week it was, or exactly how many years it had been since the building of the city. They called this the year 241, but it might have been 245, or 239, or 250. As long as the clock's deep boom rang out every hour and the lights went on and off more or less regularly, it didn't seem to matter. Lena left the book and examined the pictures of the mayors. The seventh mayor, Pod Morthwart, was her she didn't know how many greats, grandfather. He looked quite dreary, Lena thought. His cheeks were long and hollow, his mouth turned down at the corners, and there was a lost look in his eye. The picture she liked best was of the fourth mayor, Jane Larkin, who had a serene smile and fuzzy black hair. Still no one came. She heard no sounds from the hallway. Maybe they'd forgotten her. Lena went over to the closed door on the right-hand wall. She pulled it open and saw stairs going up. Maybe while she waited she'd just see where they went. She started upwards. At the top of the first flight was a closed door. Carefully she opened it. She saw another hallway and more closed doors. She shut the door and kept going. Her footsteps sounded loud on the wood, and she was afraid someone would hear her and come and scold her. No doubt she was not supposed to be here. But no one came, and she climbed on, passing another closed door. The gathering hall was the only building in Ember with 3 stories. She had always wanted to stand on the roof and look out at the city. Maybe from there it would be possible to see beyond the city into the unknown regions. If the bright city of her drawings really did exist, it would be out there somewhere. At the top of the stairs she came to a door marked "Roof," and she pushed it open. Chilly air brushed against her skin. She was outside. Ahead of her was a flat gravel surface, and about 10 paces away she could see the high wall of the clock tower. She went to the edge of the roof. From there she could see the whole of Ember. Directly below was Harkin Square, where people were moving this way and that, all of them appearing from this top-down view, more round than tall. Beyond Harkin Square the lighted window of the buildings made checkered lines, yellow and black, row after row in all directions. She tried to see farther, across the unknown regions, but she couldn't. At the edges of the city the lights were so far away that they made a kind of haze. She could see nothing beyond them but blackness. She heard a shout from the square below. "Look!" came a small but piercing voice. "Someone on the roof!" She saw a few people stop and look up. "Who is it? What's she doing up there?" someone cried. More people gathered, until a crowd was standing on the steps of the gathering hall. "They see me," Lena thought, and it made her laugh. She waved at the crowd and did a few steps from the Bugfoot scurry dance, which she'd learned on Clothing Square Dance Day, and they laughed and shouted some more. Then the door behind her burst open, and a huge guard with a bushy black beard was suddenly running towards her. "Halt!" he shouted, though she wasn't going anywhere. He grabbed her by the arm. "What are you doing here?" "I was just curious," said Lena, in her most innocent voice. "I wanted to see the city from the roof." She read the guard's name badge. It said Reg Stabmark, Chief Guard. "Curiosity leads to trouble," said Reg. He peered down at the crowd. "You have caused a commotion." He pulled her towards the door and hustled her down all 3 flights of stairs. When they came out into the waiting room, Barton Schnodd was standing there looking flustered, his jaw twitching from side to side. Next to him was the mayor. "A child causing trouble, Mayor Cole," said the chief guard. The mayor glared at her. "I recall your face from assignment day. Shame, disgracing yourself in your new job." "I didn't mean to cause trouble," said Lena. "I was looking for you so I could deliver a message." "Shall we put her in the prison room for a day or 2?" asked the chief guard. The mayor frowned. He pondered a moment. "What is the message?" he said. He bent down so that Lena could speak it into his ear. She noticed that he smelled a little like overcooked turnips. "Delivery at 8, Lena whispered, from Looper. The mayor smiled a tight little smile. He turned to the guard. "Just child's antics," he said. "We will let it go this time. From now on," he said to Lena, "behave yourself." "Yes, Mr. Mayor," said Lena. "And you," said the mayor, turning to the assistant guard and shaking a thick finger at him, "watch visitors much more carefully." Barton Schnodd blinked and nodded. Lena ran for the door. Outside the small crowd was still standing by the steps. A few of them cheered as Lena came out. Others frowned at her and muttered words like mischief, silliness, show off. Lena felt embarrassed suddenly. She hadn't meant to show off. She hurried past out onto Otterwell Street and started to run. She didn't see June, who was among those watching her. He had been on his way home from his first day in the pipeworks when he'd come across the cluster of people, gazing up at the roof of the gathering hall and laughing. He was tired and chilly. The bottoms of his pant legs were wet, and mud clung to his shoes and smeared his hands. When he raised his eyes and saw the small figure next to the clock tower, he realized right away that it was Lena. He saw her raise her arm and wave and hop about, and for a second he wondered what it would be like to be up there, looking out over the whole city, laughing and waving. When Lena came down, he wanted to speak to her, but he knew he was filthy looking and that she would ask him questions he didn't want to answer. So he turned away. Walking fast, he headed for home.